and welcome to MotorInc First. It's time to talk about a motorcycle that might get many of you angry or
Angry?
grr.
Okay.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
it's got a lot of that in it, right?
Yeah.
So this is the Guerrilla
I
450.
love how carefully you pronounce that name.
I want to call it the Gorilla. It is the Gorilla. It will be the Gorilla.
Whether you want to or not, that is where it is headed.
I've already heard it be called Gorilla twice already.
It is difficult to pronounce that word. And to say Guerrilla carefully every single time, remembering there are two R's in there and two L's in there, I don't think we're going to be able to pull this off. All they needed was, instead of a silver bike at the bottom of the range, they should have a silver bike at the top, and then we just call it the silver bike and be done with it.
But in terms of automotive icons, Japan has Godzilla, we've got Gorilla. But is this an icon? Will it be an icon?
I'm not totally convinced.
All
I think there's some very nice things about this bike.
Okay.
And I think there are some things that are being held back because Royal Enfield is being Royal Enfield.
Okay.
And the thing with Royal Enfield is they take 3-4 steps forward, and then they remember that one of their legs is firmly rooted in the past. And then they roll back some of the things that logically would make sense.
Oh, okay.
We've discussed this on the Himalayan also. Remember, we said, why doesn't the Himalayan, as India's premier tourer, Royal Enfield says globe-trotting, etc., but can't give cruise control? Because they say, where does the technology creep stop?
Correct.
Hello, but start now, then we'll talk about stopping. Same thing is going on with the Guerrilla also at some level. We'll discuss in detail. Fundamentally, though, it's a good bike. There are a couple of things that are a little strange, where I think Royal Enfield could have been a little bit more courageous and a little bit less blinded by their retro heritage and all of this kind of thing, which would have enabled this bike to do more things. But fundamentally, it's a good bike.
Can I just say, as somebody who's looking in, and somewhere the spark for me died off when I saw the bike. Like somehow how it's looking, how it's all kind of, it's not what I expected it to be. If I thought that it was going to be that naked from Royal Enfield,
Yeah.
I thought it would be the change in the story, saying that we're now going more.
Excellent point. And I think we should come back to this rather than begin here.
Yeah.
Okay. So let me quickly give you a summary of what they've done. Royal Enfield says that they started working on the Guerrilla at the same time as the Himalayan. So it is the second bike featuring the 450, but it's not the second bike being worked on as the 450. The project more or less happened together. To the point, and this is an important thing, they were riding their first prototypes pre-COVID in 2018-19.
Right.
And as I now understand it, based on that, is you're seeing a lot of Royal Enfield products coming at you very rapidly because they had lots of things happening which COVID interrupted the flow of, and now they're catching up to their original schedule. So we'll see a slew of Royal Enfields for the next, I'm going to say year and a half. And then we're going to go back to a more rational pattern of Royal Enfields.
Okay.
Now, the Himalayan is obviously supposed to be the adventure tourer. And increasingly, Royal Enfield is saying the globetrotter motorcycle. They're saying things like, if you wanted to go around the world, we can't think of a better motorcycle than the Himalayan. The Guerrilla is supposed to be like a street naked. And the reason they go to the street naked is because they say this is the most accessible motorcycle format. Right? If you think about it, the most versatile motorcycle you can buy is a commuter, like a basic commuter. And when you grow up from the commuter and want to keep that sense of versatile, easy motorcycling, you end up at a street naked. Now you can decide how sporty you want to make it or how laid back you want to make it. If you make it fully laid back, you get a classic 350. And what Royal Enfield is saying, if you make it a little bit more sporty while remaining in the boundaries of Royal Enfield's heritage and all of that, you get a Guerrilla 450. So the engine and the main frame is exactly the same as the Himalayan, with absolutely no changes at all to the hardware.
Okay.
So how they built the Himalayan's core frame, which is engine is mounted like this, the frame is around it, it's all exactly the same. They reduced the rake angle by a massive 4 degrees. Trail is down to 91 and it's a big number. Which means the steering geometry is much, much sharper than the Royal Enfield Himalayans. As it should be.
So it should be more agile because of that.
Yeah, it's a street naked, so it can't be as stable and relaxation oriented as the Himalayan. Himalayan off-road, you can't make it too agile. It has to have a nice balance.
Correct.
This is a street motorcycle, it has to be much more aggressive, but how aggressive is a choice each manufacturer will choose. Similarly, this has a massively long swing arm, but it's not the same swing arm as the Himalayan either. It is a shorter swing arm than that. So overall, this is a smaller motorcycle than the Himalayan, but it is not a small motorcycle overall. It's a skinny motorcycle overall. Okay. To do this, they had to do fully new suspension front and rear again. Strangely enough, they decided to go for a right side up fork instead of a upside down. And I think that is a bit of a mistake in terms of the value assessment of the motorcycle, because a lot of its rivals offer you upside down forks. And somehow we've started thinking about the idea that an upside down fork is an upgrade to regular telescopic forks. And in technical terms, they are. And Royal Enfield is arguing that if they had put upside down forks, the lock to lock turning angle of this bike would be restricted, or they'd have to move the front end out forward and the tank wouldn't be able to tuck so tightly in, which is why they did it. If you look at the amount of space in that area though, it's a little hard to imagine that this was the challenge why they went for the right side up fork.
At this juncture, we've always said that, specs are not so
Yeah,
important.
no, I'm just saying on the value front, when you see the
Correct.
bike for
So
the
that's
first
the
time,
idea.
yes, it stands out as they could have improved the value equation here. And I think while Bajaj is called out as a manufacturer that cuts cost a lot and sometimes visibly, I think Royal Enfield flies under that radar and they're just as hardcore at cutting costs. So this has the same headlight as all of the other headlights. All of those headlights are useless. The Guerrilla's headlights are also useless. Okay, I have torches that are more powerful than this headlight in real world conditions. Worse, the headlight has a backing plate, and the back of the bezel of the headlight has a little bit of a shape to it, and there is a complementary shape on this bezel. But because they needed the space to adjust this headlight for angle, there's a fairly large gap, and because of that shape, now it just looks like this weird unfinished thing.
Okay.
It is, to me, the biggest finish issue on this motorcycle. Everything else is smaller than this, but that headlight thing is like I can get a whole finger in there. It's weird. Okay. Similarly, I think the right side up forks primarily is a cost consideration rather than a packaging constraint. At first glance, the rear shock looks exactly the same as the Himalayans. Thank God they're saying it is retuned. It also has a linkage. The linkage has been retuned. Suspension travel obviously is much lower than the Himalayans. You get a, I think, 140 mm front travel, 150 mm rear travel. The gearbox, no change. Engine, fundamentally no change. They've remapped the engine a little bit, and they've remapped it basically saying this is a street naked, so it can have a lot more punch when the torque comes on, which again comes on at 3000 rpm. They're saying Himalayan off-road consideration, you couldn't make it very aggressive. This is a street bike on street tires, so we could make it more aggressive. So there is more snap to this motorcycle, and there is. We'll discuss it in detail. Then they said the gearbox is in the same place as before. We don't need to change it because the fundamental torque curves, they say about 80% of the torque is available from 3000 to 8000. None of those things have changed. So there's no reason to change the gearing. But because they put the smaller wheel at the back, they made the gearing longer. So it is -2 teeth.
Okay.
So it's 47 on the Himalayan, it's 45 on the Guerrilla.
Okay.
Which basically brings you back more or less to the same gearing. They're also saying the Guerrilla is 11 kilos lighter. But you have to remember, they've gone and put an 11-liter tank on this bike, and the Himalayan is 17 liters. So out of those 11, 6 though roughly are coming from the fuel itself in the curb weight calculation, which means this bike is only 5 kilos lighter. So it's not a significant weight saving, and this remains one of the heavier bikes. That is how the packaging of this motorcycle has been done. Then comes the design of this motorcycle, which is kind of weird. First, not everybody is going to like this design. I'm not saying it is unpretty. There is a certain stance to this motorcycle, which in some of the colors looks good. I'll come to which in some colors also looks good-ish. But is this going to be naturally a motorcycle like, say, the Speed 400, which everybody thought, wow, that is so proportionate and so good looking? Absolutely not. Sorry, you had a thing about the design which is in your bonnet.
Why isn't it called a scrambler?
I think the 19-inch front wheel is the key thing to it being called a scrambler, and I think those tires that they put on it is confusing you. We'll discuss the tires in detail because that is one of the weakest aspects of this motorcycle.
Because this entire stance of the bike is so scrambler.
Yeah, but I think eventually...
And I mean specifically Ducati scrambler. It looks just like that.
In some ways, yes, I agree. And I think that the reason why they won't use the Scram name for this is because the Scram 411, strangely enough, still exists. It has not,
a completely different kind of bike.
Yeah, and it has not been replaced yet. So one, that name is occupied. So to Scram 411, Scram 450 existing together would produce two completely different riding experiences. So as a family of bikes, they cannot name the two things the same. And I think this 450 line will gain at least a third bike, which will be the 19-inch front. So you'll get the 17, 19, 21 setup. You get the Himalayan, Scram and Guerrilla. What?
This is not adding up. Because I mean, this looks so much like a scrambler, and this, I mean, if this is supposed to be that middle of the line, let's say the more modern styled motorcycle, it's not doing that either. And I expected more aggression
Remember that
from.
1 foot in the pasta? That is always
I
going
mean,
to trip
and
this
that's
bike
what I'm
up.
saying. Like, you know, when we were also, I mean, this is one of the strange times when I haven't even gone and spoken to him about the bike, you know, just general kind of trying to get a sense of it. I didn't even sit on the bike because it was such a disconnect in my head in terms of what I was expecting
Yeah,
and
so
what.
to me, first thing you do is you ignore the Ducati Scrambler look thing being connected to anything about this bike. Because yes, it does remind you of those, especially this white and blue color that we got, which reminds you so strongly of the Sleds colors.
No, it doesn't. I'm not saying that it does. It's meant to be a scrambler in terms of the Ducati scrambler, but the entire profile of the bike is so that way. And if I thought of a naked from Royal Enfield, I expected not this.
That's the thing. It's not modern enough and it's not retro enough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's anyways, yeah. So yeah, that was my thing about the
Yeah,
design.
so to me, the design reference for this bike is a bit of a pendulum. And it sort of rocks between little retro, little modern, little retro, little modern, and it can't really decide what it wants to be. And therefore, I'm saying some of you will love it, and some of you will absolutely detest this bike. And that's just how it is. Like when I saw this color that they call the yellow ribbon, which has polka dots on it in purple on a yellow background, half the tank is black, all the badging is purple. I cannot do it.
Sorry, California.
Please send me this the pearl white and blue bike, which is the one you'll see in the pictures. Then that bike wasn't running well. We'll discuss that also. So we got the second test bike, which is what they call the Playa Black, which is a black bike with effectively the colors of the Belgian flag on it.
Oh, really?
They want to call it Spanish, but the stripes are vertical, so it's a Belgian flag.
Okay.
This bike comes in 3 versions called Analog, Flash and Dash, I think, or Analog, Dash and Flash, I forget. The base version has the same old analog digital meters.
Okay.
Then the above two have the TFT display from the Himalayan with updates. And if you're a Himalayan owner, you're supposed to get those updates backwards to your motorcycle also as a software update at some point. Okay? What?
Carry on.
To me, obvious issues, I think, is we tried the 390 Duke generation of motorcycles that had the 11-liter tanks. And out on the highway, they were really annoying. Royal Enfield is saying, hey, listen, this bike will still do 300 of range. But I don't think it's enough. Because the WMTC number is 29.5. So it's 29.5 into 11, you'll get roughly 300 is the calculation. In the real world,
That's
you're not
not
going to
gonna
stop until it is at the end of its reserve and all of that stuff. So you'll trade off 50, 70, 80 kilometers there. So you're down to a range of 220. So can the engine and the frame tour? Yes, it can. But can the Guerrilla tour as a package? It's going to be difficult. Not impossible, but it's unnecessarily difficult. If this was a 13.5-liter tank, as many of the motorcycles in that class have today, I think this would be a non-issue. But for whatever reason, it is 11. Part of it is packaging because remember the airbox is up and under the tank. So the tank sort of wraps around this. So the volume is limited. That's one of the issues. So to keep the tank slim and to keep it approachable, blah, 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 tank capacity has been traded in. So it's only 11 liters. Seat height in the process though, because there's a new subframe, the seat height is super low. It's 780 millimeters, which the last time we saw most recently was on the R3 and the MTO3. It makes the bike really accessible and it is quite narrow there. So very, very short riders will very easily be able to get on this bike where a normal 780 might even bother them a little bit. The Guerrilla may not bother them at all. To the point where all the optional seats are higher than that.
Okay.
So you can raise the seat height by up to 20 millimeters, I think. And there's 2 kinds of seats you can get. You can get what looks like a dirt bikey kind of flat seat and a quilted seat, which is a little bit more shaped. So you have 2 seat options in their catalog.
So the weight also doesn't feel like an issue.
Because you have your feet down securely, no. But can you get away from the impression that this is a heavy bike? No, not at all. Because it is lower to the ground. So ground clearance is a little bit lower also in the process. But again, it's a street bike, so it doesn't need the Himalayan's massive ground clearance. The side stand is now a reasonable size.
And this is obviously on alloys.
This is also on 17-inch alloys. It's lower to the ground. So when you put the side stand on, the bike immediately doesn't go to sleep like the Himalayan. And all that people struggling to get the Himalayan up and all that drama is not going to happen. Is it a light bike though? No, it's not. It is reasonably well balanced. So it's not going to constantly bug you. Once you're on the move, I was surprised to find that our first unit was running quite badly, fueling very poorly. And there is an issue here because Royal Enfield's teams keep telling us that these are production motorcycles. But all the signs and symbols say that these are pre-production motorcycles, so there's a little bit of a confusion there. So for example, none of these bikes have the stickers that say read your manual, this is your air pressure, chain adjustment, which are normal. None of these bikes have them. So I'm assuming pre-production. When it starts running badly, I'm saying pre-production. Royal Enfield's teams are saying, no, this is production. So I get fully confused. But then I found out what has happened. In those pre-production units, there was a certain set of clutches that were slightly out of tolerance, and that would cause the bike to jerk because the connections weren't clear. So we got the second bike. The second bike, it's much smoother than the Himalayan.
Oh,
Not smooth. I'm not saying smooth, okay? Don't get me wrong. It is smoother.
same kind of rev range where the
Same kind of rev range, including a small spike in the vibration right in the middle where you won't want it.
Correct.
But significantly smoother than the Himalayan overall, which I was happy to see. So if you ride it in the Himalayan mode, which is, stay under 5000 RPM, it's very quick. You're not carrying a lot of revs, but you're not going very slowly either. The Guerrilla feels a lot smoother. Since the engine is the same, if they have figured out a map that solves a little bit of the vibration, I'm hoping they put it back to the Himalayan also.
Oh, so even through that, it's cleaner.
Yeah. And then 6 onwards, it is again cleaner. Like again on the Himalayan, there was a spike and it came back. Same. And therefore, it has that same weirdness where from 80 to 100, you're okay. But 120, you're like, oh, so smooth again. So that weird, I want to ride here, but this is where the maximum amount of vibration thing is also on the Guerrilla. It's just at a much lower level than the Himalayan. So I think a lot fewer people will be bugged by it.
Okay.
Now, if you've tested a Guerrilla and a Himalayan, do let us know if this is our test bike feeling better or this is all Guerrillas feeling better. It is really important. So if you leave us a comment, I tested the Guerrilla, it's better or worse than the Himalayan on this front, it will really help the others. Okay. So again, no surprises. When you do this, the airbox noise is amazing. The gearbox is very, very slick. Slip and assist clutch, and it's slightly further tuned from the Himalayan. So the clutch effort is a little bit lighter, but it's still not the lightest in the class. For that, you have to have, I think, a CB350 or a Triumph 400, which have some of the lightest clutches, not this. Will it bug you in traffic? No, I don't think so. But in the same way, just like the Himalayan, below 3000 RPM in traffic, it struggles a little bit. Once you get past 3000 RPM, then there is abundant torque and you never really struggle with torque again. What you'll really enjoy about this bike is it really comes on. And the economy mode basically softens throttle response in the first 2 or 3 gears. And the idea is that it gives you a small fuel economy benefit, but as you get higher in the speed range, there is no real fundamental benefit. And it is designed each gear at a time. So I was asking them that why didn't you also do a much lower setting in, say, the 6th, so that once you're out on the highway and cruising, then sort of like overdrive plus, you could just bring the economy up and give me even more range. And to that they said we didn't think it was required because the rider's hand will do that much modulation and those speeds it may not make much of a difference. But in the bottom 3 gears in the city where you'd want to save some amount of fuel, switching to economy mode might give you an advantage. Don't get carried away by this. The last time Royal Enfield said this, the total difference wasn't even 10%. So there is a small difference. It will not be major. What might be useful is because economy mode is a little bit softer, it might help you deal with the torque because there is a lot of it. And if you're a new rider, you will struggle with the Guerrilla initially for sure. The reason you will struggle is because they decided to do tires based on the form of the tire rather than the function of the tire. So they give this thing 120, 160 section tires. They are really chunky, fat, heavy tires, and the heavy tires interrupts the ride quality, which is another weakness on this bike. But they designed it to look like a block pattern tire.
Yeah.
And in the dry, it was fine, honestly. In the wet, this tire is one of the least grippy tires I have tested. Right? If you remember, on the way to work from the Vashi toll till here, there are those black patches of really glossy tarmac where they've patched over. I have been drifting sideways on the Guerrilla on all of them. And more or less at all of the speeds.
All of the speeds means upwards of 60. But is it an issue also at low speeds?
Not so much. But it's there. And I'm telling you, as a frame of reference, I have tested, let's call it 12, 14 motorcycles in the last 3 months, out of which at least 11 were in the rain at some point or the other. I have not felt this kind of a lack of confidence on anything else. So these tires are definitely terrible. In the dry, you'll be fine. In the wet, you're going to struggle. Unfortunately, 120, 160 is not the most common size. If they were 110, 150 like everything else, you just get a wide range of tires straight away, slap on something really sticky like a Road 6 or a Eurogrip Pro Extreme Pro or the H1 or something, and just you'd be gold. This tire size will cause a few hiccups finding something to replace it with, but these Seats are only good for the dry. In the wet, they're not doing anything.
That's disappointing.
Yeah. When it is dry, when there is a corner in front of you though, this is a really responsive bike and you'll really enjoy riding it. So what Royal Enfield wanted to do was build a motorcycle that sits sort of halfway between the relaxed feel of a retro roadster, which is, let's say, the classic 350, and the full aggression of something much more modern like a KTM 390 Duke. As a spectrum. What happened?
Why?
Their logic is that it needs to appeal to a new rider and not scare them too much and excite them a little bit, but an experienced rider should also be able to have a good time. 1 foot in the... Always remember, 3 feet forward, 1 foot at the back.
Dude, this is to me, what you're describing to me says that you take something that has a certain characteristic and now I'm going to hammer it the other way because I don't want it to be that.
Yeah.
Because I'm just thinking about that one time I took the 450, rode it up to Pune after we got it here, the Himalayan. And the entire way there, yes, I dealt with that engine and said like, shit, this is getting in the way in terms of the vibration, all of that. But the entire ride there and back, the only thing I spoke to people about was, what a freaking chassis. And like there are moments that you'll just remember about how it transitions, how beautiful it is in terms of agility.
Yes.
And which is why my expectations of this bike were quite different because of that personality that chassis showed.
Yes, but Buddha has been very clear about this. If you expect, then you will also be disappointed.
Dude, I swear, this is one straight to the heart for me, man.
Yeah, so you're absolutely spot on. This is not on the same scale of greatness as the Himalayan chassis is by any stretch of the imagination. Because Royal Enfield could not find it in themselves to commit one way or another. If this bike was a lot more relaxed, there'd be a nicer Guerrilla in there. And if this bike was a lot more aggressive, there would be a nicer Guerrilla in there. This is trying to do too many things at the same time. It ends up getting a little bit confused. Can this corner? Yes. Will you have fun? Yes, I think you will have fun. Will it add up to her experience? Will you say, man, I had such a great ride? Honestly, I think that will be a struggle.
What are you enjoying the corners more in? The Himalayan?
Himalayan. Oh, absolutely Himalayan.
I mean, I actually thought you were going to start this conversation entirely with like, dude, okay, it's got issues, but what handling? And since you didn't start there, I was just, I was a little thrown off there and then.
No, this, look, if the Himalayan was a 10 on 10, this bike is a 6, 7, maybe on 10. Okay, so does it handle well enough? Yes, it does. Does it handle in a way that is going to say, man, I love that? No, it's neither here nor there, and it basically confuses you a little bit. And I'm happy to ride it, but these tires are not right, and it sort of goes back and forth, and the whole bike is honestly back and forth. It's the same with the ride quality also. I'll tell you what the issue with the ride quality is. Because they wanted to build a reasonably aggressive street naked, they went away from the sophisticated control of the Himalayan to something a little bit stiffer. Now, the media went to Spain to ride it, to some of the best roads they've ever seen and twisties, and they hardly hit a bump. And even there were people saying it feels like this is going to be very stiff.
Uh-oh.
When it comes here, no, it's not stupidly stiff, but it is on the stiff side. So, is it not sophisticated enough to absorb the small bumps? Yes, it is. It manages.
And
but it is not
full of small
but
bumps.
It is not compliant to the point where you say whatever happens, this bike will handle it. No, you will feel some of it. And the overall
is it like a?
It's not as bad as the Super Meteor. To me, the Super Meteor is the bookend for how bad can it get. Okay. Right after the Super Meteor would be, say, I think the Shotgun. Just below that, the Hunter. These are the 3 bikes where Royal Enfield's rear suspension tuning makes just no sense at all. And the fact that they haven't updated the suspension since the bikes came out makes even less sense than that. On the other bookend of this is the Himalayan and the Classic 350, which are 2 incredible suspension packages. The Himalayan, for that travel to manage the attitude and poise of that frame over so many different kinds of conditions without ever feeling out of control. It's awesome. And then the Classic 350, which at first glance does absolutely nothing.
I can give you a guarantee. I have goosebumps right now, and I'm sure he does too. When just talking about that behavior of the Himalayan 450, the chassis.
It's incredible.
It's amazing.
Yeah. The suspension control on the Himalayan is just... I said in my story that it was a masterclass when we did the View. And I'm still saying, that kind of suspension tuning, it blew my mind. And the fact that it is on a budget, it is not adjustable. I can't imagine what you do with adjustability there. The amount of skill you would have to run out of the Himalayan suspension and then need adjustability, I can't even wrap my mind around that thing.
Most of us wouldn't need it.
Right? So we've put what, 3,000 kilometers on the Himalayan we have in the office. At no point have I ever felt saying, I need to mess with this a little bit. No, it's just fine. Right? From that perspective, the Guerrilla is going to feel a lot stiffer. Is it uncomfortably stiff and don't buy one like I went for the Super Meteor or the Shotgun or the Hunter? No, it's not that bad. But I think this could have been a lot softer for our conditions and it would just feel more natural. And again, Royal Enfield is doing this strange thing where the preload is set to the lowest. It's not in the middle. So again, all your options are on one side of the adjustment. And when we get a Guerrilla, we'll try and raise the preload and see if that makes a difference or not. But first impressions, don't go in there thinking you're buying a comfortable street bike. The 400X, the Himalayan, which is technically not a street bike, the Speed 400, the Maverick 400 are all more comfortable than the Guerrilla. The Guerrilla is composed, but it is stiff. Okay, the brake spec is also slightly different. The front brake is now a 310 mm unit, dual channel ABS, and they've not given you the option to turn off rear, which is absolutely fine. This bike doesn't need it. The brakes are fine. They work well enough. The bike stops well enough. Full confidence, no stress. And just to round out the story, the dash has been updated. So the graphics have been cleaned up a little bit. The Google Maps thing with the phone having to remain on, all of that stupidity is still there. Clever thing to say, we'll use Google Maps, we'll put it on the screen, you won't have to mess with your phone. But if your phone is unlocked, all it has to do is fly out of your pocket one day and then that phone is gone, it's never coming back. I think that's a bad idea. If you cannot solve it, you just shouldn't do it at all. I mean, to me, it's inarguable. What they've added on top of that is now you can record the route that you took and share a GPX file with somebody else.
Okay.
And Royal Enfield have the Wingman app, which is able to interact with the rider. So if they spot a problem on your bike, then they can call you and say, we're seeing that you might be in trouble, can we help you with that? Or you can call them and say, I'm in trouble. And the slide that they shared in the presentation says the response and resolution time is just 20 minutes. If they can achieve that, that would be actually quite the achievement.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. The other thing to know about the Guerrilla is it's really well priced.
Wait, before we go there.
You sit more or less upright. It's a slightly sporty riding position. So from the Himalayan, you're looking at a lower and closer handlebar. It's narrower and your feet are tucked back slightly. So it's slightly sportier. Committed sporty? No. But it's like a sporty naked bike and it's a very accessible, easy riding position. The seat could have been a little bit better.
Okay.
A little bit. I mean, it's not a deal breaker. The seat is okay. It could have been a little bit better.
Can it be likened to the Duke, the earlier ones, where it was like feet were tucked back, but you
No, that's very, very aggressive compared to this. This is much more relaxed. So your feet are back, but it's not like very far back. It's a little bit further back than the Himalayan, so it feels like you're lean forward. That's it.
But isn't the bar a little high?
Not on the riding. You feel okay.
Yeah.
And you can also rotate the bar a little bit because it's not like a big bend. It's a relatively short bend, so you can lower it a little bit, bring it a little bit closer to you and stuff. You'll be fine.
Okay.
So I never thought of this as so sporty that, oh wow, I have to go faster. No. When I wanted to corner like that, then I had to actually climb onto the front of the motorcycle a little bit, scooch up front a little bit more and all of that. So.
And what does it actually do in corners?
It's actually, initially there is that sense of weight to this motorcycle that you will get used to. But once you get used to the weight, it is a predictable, stable motorcycle. There is no fundamental issue here. It's just that sense of it didn't take a stand. Does it want to be aggressive or not?
Does it feel playful?
Yeah. Between the aggression of this engine and how much torque it puts out, between the fact that this is fundamentally a stable chassis with a fast steering front end, you're not going to struggle with the corners at all and you might even have fun. I'm just saying philosophically, if this bike had taken a stand, this bike could have been a lot more fun for two specific kinds of riders. This trying to appeal to both is where this bike feels a little bit lost. So if, for example, it had this much torque and a more relaxed attitude and chassis, then I think you'd corner pretty decently. But you'd feel like, oh, what a nice relaxed feeling. Sort of like how the Maverick does now. Or if they had turned up the aggression a couple of notches, shortened the wheelbase further, and made the riding position a little bit more aggressive, in therefore a slightly more modern motorcycle, then you'd be like, man, Royal Enfield could make something so aggressive. What an amazing thing this is. Which would also require grippy tires and then these Seats and stuff. And if they pushed it like that, then you'd see a new side to Royal Enfield, which would be really performance oriented. This is just taking two steps towards that and saying, not just yet. Now, to you as a rider, this doesn't mean this is a bad motorcycle. I think you should go get a test ride, and I think there will be a fair number of you who, between the price of this motorcycle, between the feeling of this motorcycle, you'll really like it. But just remember, this time the paint schemes are really out there. Okay, it's not normal for Royal Enfield to do these kind of colors, but they've gone and done it. Now you go and see what you like. The base silver is actually a very nice looking bike among all of the color schemes. The top blue and white that you're seeing here, that's also a good looking bike. The yellow, black and purple, I'm not so convinced. The gold and red, like the rear 3/4 of the tank is gold. But there'll be more colors in time, I'm sure. Now, no traction control.
Okay.
We don't need it.
I'm sorry, I kind of lost my vibe there.
Yeah. No traction control. Why? We don't need it. 40 bhp bike in a country with no license laws for stratification to determine new riders from old riders. Price at 2.3 lakh rupees. I think it should have had good traction control. But Royal Enfield is still being this shy of the idea that our bikes are sitting in the modern era, even if they have to appeal to an audience with a retro taste. And we do need to give some features. And they're just refusing to do it, especially frustrating given the fact that all the other elements are there. This is ride by wire.
Correct. I mean, there's literally no reason why. I mean, why would you not offer 40 bhp is plenty?
I think it's, I'm increasingly beginning to conclude that this is just a money saving thing.
Yeah. I think after the suspension thing, where it's become a recurring theme, and that's the easiest place to cheap out.
Yeah.
Okay. I think that's a recurring theme with the suspension, and I think these electronics are no different than that.
Yeah. So, net, Karthik, to be honest with you, did I enjoy the riding? Yes. But did I enjoy the riding the way I did the Himalayan, where I constantly wanted to go out and ride it some more and ride it in a new place and try something? No, not like that. So, it's a nice bike, but it is nothing more than a nice bike.
So what kind of use case would you recommend this for? What
To
is
me,
its
this
sweet spot?
might be a good upgrade from the guys who have Hunters and who can't deal with the rear suspension anymore.
Okay.
That comfort jump is there for sure. It's better than the Hunter. It's not substantially larger feeling than the Hunter. Hunter prices start at 1.7 and they go up to whatever 1.8, 1.9. These prices start at 2.3, go up to 2.5. So it's very much in that ballpark. I'm still scared to recommend a 40 bhp bike as your first bike, but if you're considering a Hunter, this is very similarly sized. It's not going to intimidate you in that sense because they've not built it out to be too heavy or too large. You'll get used to it. So maybe this is a better purchase than a Hunter.
And what is its happy space?
As in?
Where did you enjoy it the most?
It's a city bike. That 11-liter tank caps it at city plus weekend trip. 2.5 liters of fuel tank space that they took away from us. I think it's unnecessary. It would have just easily done highway and this. But it doesn't really snap together into an idea of saying here is a versatile 40 bhp street naked that will do city, that will do highway, sorted. It's just 2 steps short. And Royal Enfield has the best mirrors in the industry.
Oh my. Still.
2 bikes. How many mirrors is that? 4. How many do you think came loose?
2 left.
2 left. No, and this one was the best one. I have never seen the first one or the second one. Second one, I'm going down the road, I'm doing 70 and the mirror rotates into the wind. Not out of the wind, into the wind, and then takes a full circle and comes back. So I said, okay, no stress, I have put it back like this, right? And then on both the bikes, left mirrors on both, right mirror on one of them, it would be okay. So you adjust it and I can see just my edges of my shoulders like I set it up and all of that. And then 5 kilometers later, it's pointed at the ground, right? So then you flick it up and then you flick it up and then you ride and then you check, go to check. Oh no, it's pointed at the ground again. And you do this again. And I cannot believe that a company that wants to be the world's largest middleweight motorcycle manufacturer, makes a range of almost 10 motorcycles now, goes all over the earth to sell these motorcycles, has such a powerful brand, so many design people, so many engineers can't figure out how to make a set of decent stock mirrors.
It's not a question of them coming loose, but just those mirrors are...
No, in fact, when he went for the Himalayan launch, one of the mirrors flew off and that was one less mirror to worry about for the rest of the ride.
I was very happy to remove it, put it in the backpack.
No, it flew off, no one, or did you save it?
No, I took it off and then I put it in.
So the best place for a stock Royal Enfield mirror is your backpack, and that's not a good thing.
And the left one at that.
I like the fact that the engine became smoother. I love the torque of the Sherpa. I mean, it's 40 Newton meters, it's 40 bhp, it feels completely honest, and this motorcycle is aggressive. Like, I love how snappy the throttle is, to the point where I said, new rider, this much snap, especially in second, maybe also in third, maybe I would have wanted some traction control. Then when the rain started and those patches I hit, then I definitely wanted some traction control. So it has the zing needed to feel like a powerful, robust 400.
Even if I were trying to force fit into a box, let's say they wanted it to be that bike that you said, the one in between, which is a friendly, naked, which has got good amount of performance. It's a step up from the Meteor. Sorry, not Meteor, the
Need Hunter.
Hunter. The Hunter, relative to, I mean, the fun factor in that sense, relative to the Himalayan.
Yeah.
Okay, I get. With the engine being more aggressive,
See, that's the thing. No, Royal
lack
Enfield.
of traction control.
Correct. So Royal Enfield, ek to they have this weird blind spot about having multiple states of tune when they build new engines, right? Like we said on the J series, if the Hunter had a little bit more top end performance, the Hunter's chassis would just feel much greater. We've said this.
Yes.
For the Himalayan, when we spoke to them, the vibration, they said, look, we wanted to hit 40 and 40. Big single cylinder 450cc engine, 40 bhp, you're going to get some vibration. Great. This bike doesn't feel like it needs 40 bhp. This bike could easily be 38 and take those 2 bhp, 2 Newton meters off and just use that to calm the vibrations out by unstraining the motor a little bit. This would just felt effortless at that point of time.
Because that engine tune is kind of throwing me off, because I'm imagining the bike in terms of corners being like this, does everything, but does it with just a little bit of restraint.
It's not even restraint. It's like competence versus enthusiasm.
Fair enough. That's perfect. In which case, if the engine was a bit softer,
Correct.
I'd be able to carry that one pace smoothly.
Correct. And,
more easily.
And that's the thing, Kartik. It's got so much torque. And this is so much smoother feeling at least my test bike was so much smoother feeling than the Himalayan that I can imagine that if you were to stay under 5000 RPM consciously, you would have that reasonably smooth experience. It's just that the bike just doesn't take a stand as to what it wants to be. What I'm basically saying is I think the time has come for Royal Enfield to snap out of the fact that everything has to be connected to heritage. At some point, Triumph had to make this decision also. And they said, we are a big enough brand to be able to contain retro and contain modern and find a balance between the two. Right? And in some ways, Triumph can get those balances things wrong also. I mean, look at the Speed 400. It's just modern enough to be so compact that it has very little street presence. But it does look like a retro and the finish levels are awesome. And there is a balance to it. And obviously, some people like it and some people don't, and that's fine. But this thing that we're going to be more modern, we're going to put 17, it's almost like when the 17-inch wheels arrive, Royal Enfield turns into Superman and the 17-inch wheels are immediately the kryptonite.
Triumph is a good analogy because
it's the same kind of brand, right?
Yeah. Triumph, historic, everything. Yeah. But they have the heritage side, which is all the Thruxtons and whatnot.
Correct. And there is no conflict in your head saying that, look, the Thruxton and the Street Triple can't come from the same company.
None at all.
Right? You're desperate for the Daytona 660, the original Daytona, not this new one. You're saying the Daytona 675 belonged to this brand as much as all of their retro roadsters. And you see no conflict in this. You see no issue adopting the Tiger as a representative of what the Triumph brand is. So I don't understand why Royal Enfield is struggling with this so much.
This is an opportunity lost clearly for me, because I thought this would take them into a different direction. This would give that new sheen to the brand, which would get more kinds of mindsets into the family as well.
Yeah. It's again, think about it. When they did the Hunter, my disappointment with the Hunter is that the Hunter says, go faster, we love it. Go faster, we love it. When you go faster, the J series doesn't have it.
Done.
And done, right? The GRR is the same thing again. I ride the Guerrilla and I'm excited. Wow, so much torque, sounds so great. And when you start pushing it, you're like, hey, wait, it's not as aggressive as you think it will be. The engine is, but the frame is not. And is it not competent? Because it is competent, but it's not enthusiastically saying, come on, bro, let's do this. Again, we are deeply in the Royal Enfield brand minefield, as it were. I think most of you who ride the Guerrilla will reasonably have a good feeling about it.
Okay, dokie.
In fact, I wish they'd build a more aggressive version of this called the GRRR. Because when you add the third R, then you get the really aggressive machine, right? So it'll call the GRR 450. It'll finally have the rubber it deserves.
Right now it's just...
Yeah, it'll be, I don't know, another 10-15 kilos lighter.
Yeah. I would expect the weight saving also to be more. Considering the Himalayan had so much plumbing on it.
Yeah, but look, I don't think Royal Enfield is interested in making out-and-out performance-oriented motorcycles. They're very much in their little world of little bit more. until something causes them to snap out of it and say, okay, let's go all out once and see what happens. And they might have to sacrifice a product in the process. Like imagine, for example, that they went out and built something that is exactly what the Duke 390 represents to you in your head. Not in terms of the design and stuff, but that kind of a nature. I don't know that the first wave of that product will be well received by an audience. But a company like Royal Enfield can afford to ignore that 200 crores or whatever they spend on that product as a brand extension. That it brought our brand to a whole bunch of new people. It's a small number of people, but they have a voice. They'll communicate the fact that we are changing, we can build something more aggressive, and you can move on from that. And I think the Guerrilla was the opportunity to do it. But increasingly, I'm thinking that going forward, when Royal Enfield says we have a bike, what is the front wheel size? When they say 17 inches, oh, my guards are up.
Jane do.
No, not jane do. I don't know what's going to happen now.
Okay, alrighty then. This is about the bike that's stuck between two worlds. That's the past and the future that could have been. This is the Royal Enfield Guerrilla. I'm going to call it Guerrilla. Guerrilla 450. Okay, the Guerrilla 450. It's meant to be a bit of a beast, which it really isn't. In some ways, it is. The engine is the same one as the Himalayan, which is the 450 Sherpa, and it's got the same tune in terms of the power, rather. The tune is different. It's been made more aggressive.
It's a map tune, not a performance tune. So just
Correct.
maps.
It's just so that it feels more responsive as a naked bike, and along with that, it also has changes to the gearing. The gearing has actually been made a little bit taller because keep in mind it also has the tune for the engine, 17-inch wheels front and rear, so it'll be a lighter, more agile kind of motorcycle. The chassis, in terms of the core structure, is the same, but it has been changed a little bit. So the front geometry is sharper, much sharper than the Himalayan, which it needed to be for this bike. The rear swing arm is shorter, so it's a smaller bike, but it's still not a small motorcycle. And it's got chunky rubber 120 up front and 160 at the rear. And the reason this should be remembered is because the tires are not great. These Seats are all right for the dry. Watch out when it's wet. Other than that, in terms of design, that's where you see that being stuck in two worlds kind of thing. This is meant to be a naked, a modern take, a modern kind of motorcycle from Royal Enfield for the nakeds, but it feels quite a bit like a I'm going to say it looks like a scrambler. It doesn't really look like a naked. He doesn't agree entirely, but it's not a design that's speaking to you of a naked in that sense, a more aggressive kind of naked, which this engine tune has gone towards. As far as the riding is concerned, it's a quick engine. The great thing about the engine is that it's much smoother than what the Himalayan 450 was. It's got the same kind of issue. So you think of everything that it does in terms of vibrations, it does exactly those same things, but at a lower level. Yep. So you have that same kind of vibration coming in at 5 to 6,000 RPM, which is the 80 to 100 kilometer range. At that point, you will feel the most amount of vibrations, but everything relative to the Himalayan is lesser. So that's a great thing about the engine. It's become smoother. It's an enjoyable, punchy engine, and it does feel quick. And in that sense, Shumi was thinking that this should have had traction control because it is quick. Those tires are slippery. Yep. And if this is meant to be a friendlier kind of motorcycle, and yes, that's the idea, that this is meant to be sitting somewhere in between classic 350 as a standard kind of bike and the 390 Duke as a naked. It sits somewhere in between. And for that, if it had to be friendlier, it should have had traction control, especially with the kind of tires that it has right now. And with 160s, finding options is going to be tricky. The thing that's going to be in my bonnet and it's kind of, and like I said, I expected Shumi to start this conversation talking about wow, the handling, right? And that's because our background comes from the Himalayan, where the chassis and the suspension just spoke incredibly eloquently about what all you could do off-road, on-road, through the corners, on the streets, all of that. And which is why when we spoke about the Himalayan back then, we said there's a fantastic naked in there and we can't wait for it to happen. Well, it's happened, and it's not quite in that vein. It's been dulled down a bit. It's not a dull motorcycle, it's a competent motorcycle, but it's just that it's not enthusiastic in the way that the Himalayan gets to you when you're riding it hard and fast. And like the Himalayan, this engine also sounds great. It's got that intake noise. The airbox is under the tank, and talking about the tank, it's 11-liter tank, which means doing trips on this, longer trips on this will require frequent stops. Royal Enfield says that it's got a 300-kilometer range, which sounds like a bit of a stretch. I think.
No, and that means empty to empty.
Yeah. I
Which
can
means you're
imagine.
not going to ride it like that. Which
Yeah.
means your effective range will be something like 240, 220 or something like that.
Yeah, I think anything around 250 will be super if you can stretch it that far.
Yeah.
So that will be an issue when you're traveling. In terms of the weight, this naked kind of format has reduced the weight with all the changes to the frame, everything. Also, it is down by 5 kilos. 6
Yeah,
kilos.
effectively.
Yeah, which is really not all that much. But the good thing is that the seat height is down to 780. It's a really low seat height. It's also a narrow point. So despite the weight not being that much lower, it still feels easy to manage because even shorter riders can get their feet down flat on the floor easily. It's not a bike that will feel light inherently, whether it's in the corners or just picking it off the stand. It doesn't lean over like the Himalayan. That's the good thing. So it's not going to be a struggle that way. But it is still a heavy motorcycle, but it's not going to get in your way that way.
And it can be made lighter. It has a center stand. To me, center stands don't really do much. So if this was my Guerrilla, the first thing that I'm getting rid of right after the sari guard is the center stand. There's just no reason to have those 5-8 kilos on the bike.
This has a center stand.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, that's surely.
No, because back in the 70s, all bikes had center stands, Kartik.
That's easily 5 kilos.
Did I keep a straight face to that? I wanted to keep a straight face to that.
It's pretty good. Yeah. Aside from that, there are 3 variants, which there's analog, dash, and flash. The analog has an analog instrument cluster. The other 2 get TFTs, which are slightly updated from what they were on the Himalayan, and a software update should bring them to the Himalayan as well. They still have that Google Maps functionality, which requires you to keep your phone screen on, which isn't really useful. And now they also have a companion app called as the Wingman, which is basically for remote diagnostics. So in case you have an issue, they can look into your bike and try and suggest a fix if they can do it over there, which is cool. That aside, prices range between 2.3 to 2.5 lakh rupees.
Roughly, yeah.
So that's not bad. And yeah, the other changes for the higher variants are the colors. And the colors are
Bright.
a little disco-y, a little beach
No,
boy
they're very,
vibe.
very unusual colors for Royal Enfield.
Beach boy vibe. And I just imagined a surfboard on every bike, every color that I saw.
Yeah.
So
Although the last time they used the surfboard imagery was for the Interceptor.
Really?
Remember that great jingle that they had for the Interceptor? Do you remember it?
No, I don't.
Look it up. It's a great sounding song, which they launched the Interceptor with the orange one with the surfboard on the side. You'll see it.
And talking about ruining stuff, the suspension, it's not ruined, but it is firm. And so that means you will feel, as Shumi said, the smaller stuff, the smaller stuff will be fine. The bigger stuff you will feel clearly.
You would have expected 10-20% more compliance. That's it.
I'm going to be the I'm going to be the KTM fanboy here.
Go for it.
Do you feel the roughness of the road on the 390 Duke?
No. The 390 another level now. No, it's another level now. There's no two ways about it. The 390 suspension
So
just
that
took
can do it.
What?
The 390 can do it.
What? Do what?
Great suspension.
Yeah.
Okay, fine.
But KTM is not drawing boundaries around themselves by saying we want to belong to a certain decade, right?
Okay. And yeah, this has telescopic
And
forks.
also remember, forget KTM for a minute. If they could do that kind of sophistication on a 200 mm travel show off upside down fork, this should be simpler.
Okay, benchmark it for me against the Classic.
The Classic has more ability and no sophistication. Right? The Classic 350 suspension is like a hammer. You see a bump, it hammers it out. It hits it so hard that you can't feel the bump anymore.
Yeah, you don't feel it.
You don't feel it at all. So the Himalayan on the other side is light-footed, right? It's managing something and it's giving you just enough information for you to make a good decision with, but nothing more than that. There's no harshness. This is sort of like sporty. So you'll feel it and you'll bounce a little bit.
Okay.
Is it uncomfortable because of it? Automatically, no. But when you hit a bad stretch where there's lots of bumps, you are going like this through the whole thing. Whereas the Classic 350 will just sort of settle in and say, oh, okay,
I
I'll
get
deal
what you
with this.
mean. That like a little bit of that having kind of feeling that you'll end up with. Got it.
Which is why I'm saying, if there was a little bit more compliance, not massively, 10-15% more compliance, then it just smoothened it out to a point where it's saying this bike is so easy to do this with. Not that you won't feel anything. You'd just be, yes, okay, I'm totally okay with this.
So motorcycle's got a strange complement or mix of characters in it. So the engine is aggressive, the chassis is kind of let's call it just uninterested in this moment, relative
Yeah,
to
not
the
interested enough.
relative to the what the engine is trying to do. The suspension is simple. Let's put it that way. It's not really at the level of the engine or what the idea of this motorcycle is. So it ends up being a little bit of a very interesting purchase. Definitely, given the power, the price that it's coming at, and the unique look that it has, if it works for your taste. So it's a motorcycle that will interest you. Is accessible in terms of pricing and has most of the specs are in the right place.
Correct.
So it will be attractive. Whether it works for you is something that you need to go and ride and see what kind of motorcycle and mood that you're in.
Yeah, I think I can set context in another direction also. Okay, and honestly, if this bike had come out before the Himalayan was there to set context, I don't think you'd think so poorly of this motorcycle. But the Himalayan basically moved that benchmark by a massive amount,
Yeah.
and it just makes the Guerrilla look less fully formed.
Okay.
And every time a motorcycle wants to be 2-3 things at the same time, it's very difficult to get it right. The only manufacturer, I've said this before, the only manufacturer who can do this, balancing various kinds of genres and making them together into a khichdi, and the khichdi turns out tasty, is reliably Honda. Nobody else can do it.
Correct.
Nobody else can do it.
As you were describing, I was like, shit, that's Honda.
I think Royal Enfield today needs to clearly take a stand. They have built their brand. Everybody gets that they are retro and they're connected to Britain and Redditch. Yeah, okay, we get it. They have the money, the space, the will to move forward. I just wish they'd do it with intent. There's no reason for this awesome company that is doing such good engineering today to be waffling around on things like this.
I'm going to say it again, man. That chassis, that suspension on the Himalayan was aimed there. It was beaten down to this.
I'm telling you that if Royal Enfield had just controlled the vibration on the Himalayan, even to the level of the one that we had on this test bike, 1, 2, made sure that the chassis teams understand that no matter how complicated the engine mount gets, there should be nobody in the world able to break that frame and recreate the legend. In 2 years, 3 years time, that Himalayan would have been a global legend. Today, the Himalayan has specifically 2 precise flaws. One is the level of vibration, which I'm sure Royal Enfield over the years will refine further. And the second is this stigma of first Himalayan, frame broken, second Himalayan, frame also broken. Now you explain it in engineering terms how much ever you want. Now it is part of the documented history of this bike. Remember, first Himalayan, in their promo film, the footpeg broke. Then the frames actually broke. And Royal Enfield fixed all of those things. And the Himalayan became very good. And the last 411s were very decent bikes to own. Then you do the new one. And the one thing you want to say कि ये नहीं होना चाहिए किसी भी हालत में, is nobody should be able to break the frame. हो गया. And if whether it is Royal Enfield's fault or not is not the issue here, it is bad news, right? Because I ride that Himalayan every day and my heart is just saying whether I'm feeling good about riding, I'm not feeling like riding, I'm feeling like riding aggressively, non-aggressively, I am watching what I'm passing through or not watching passing through. I'm just happy.
How sweet, man.
And the Guerrilla doesn't do that. The Guerrilla has moments. You come out of a toll booth, you see an empty stretch, you gun that engine, the Guerrilla has a moment where it's like, man, this engine. Over that crest is that line of glossy tarmac. And then you go like this and you're like, oh no, these tires. And then you say, oh, 120, 160, no Michelin Road 5. I don't think there is. No H1. No
H1
Protox Sport.
Yeah.
At least not yet. So currently I'm limited. I want better tires on this bike. I think it will do much better on better tires.
Okay, do you think that if the tires were better, then the corners would have been also better?
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
It would have.
For sure. If this thing had grippy road rubber, it would dramatically change your cornering experience.
Okay.
Yeah.
So bottom line is either they could have made a lot of the other stuff aggressive about the bike to match the engine, or they could have gone softer on the engine, and which would have been completely fine given how torquey this engine already is, and the performance available easily at lower revs is plenty. So in that, it's not just stuck between two worlds and stuck between two states of mind.
Yeah. So I want the GR450, which is the gentle one. I want the GRR 450, which is the aggressive one. And then the GRRR 450, which is the aggressive one.
Yeah.
And then the GRR 450 is okay.
Hey.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. Now, as far as I know, more 450s will come. I think at least 2 more 450s will come. And I'm basing it on the idea that there are 4 350s. And currently there are 4 650s. And we know that the classic 650 might happen. If that happens, Bullet 650 will also obviously happen. We've seen spy shots of something that looks like a Himalayan 650. We don't know what it is.
Before you get to the 450s, you tell me.
Not.
No, you finish this. 450s, I'll guess.
And therefore, I think there will be at least 2 more 450. What do you do? What do you think?
Hunter 450.
This is the Hunter 450.
This is the Hunter 450?
Yeah.
Then why didn't they call it the Hunter 450?
The Hunter name is a different thing. It's a Guerrilla.
No, why not then?
I mean, conceptually, this is a Hunter 450. What is the difference?
I don't know.
I'm telling you that conceptually, to me, this is a Hunter 450.
No, that can be the softer, easier bike.
Hunter is not softer. It might be easier, but it's not softer for sure.
Okay, fine. Okay, not Hunter 450. Scram 450, of course.
I think so. Yeah.
Scram
It makes sense to have a 17, 19 and 21 on the 450 platform for sure. So I would do a Scram 450.
Scram 450. What else? Oh, is there still a Scrambler 450 remaining of some sort?
Supermoto.
Oh,
Take the Himalayan and put 17-inch wheels on it.
then what's the Scram?
Scram is 19-inch wheels.
What's a Scram? Achha, Scram is 19s. Okay.
See, think about it like a Lego set.
Huh.
In your current box, you can see 2 finished sets.
Nice.
One is the long travel suspension 21-inch front wheel ADV and relatively short suspension travel 17-inch wheeled roadster, right? So you will naturally say that Royal Enfield is used to making a 19-inch scrambler style motorcycle. So that's the Scram 450. So what can you do? Hey,
Still got 17
we could take the 17s and we could put it on the Himalayan suspension. Then you get a supermoto. What you do with a 190 kilo supermoto, I don't honestly know, but for what it's worth.
All right, so we'll see if that turns out that way. But it'll be. I mean, I'm sure there'll be. I'm sure they've got more than 4 lined up.
Yeah, and look, you can't do a platform today and not build as many things as you can. So yeah, this is completely normal, par for the course.
Alrighty, done.
Done.
What next?
What next? In the run-up to Diwali, there should be many more things. Okay. But at the rate that MotorInc First are piling up, I don't think there's any point discussing. I don't know when there is a release slot for the next thing.
Yeah, there's lots happening, and so we'll be doing these conversations a lot more in the coming several weeks, I guess.
Yeah. And I think in more places than you're used to also. We keep dropping these hints. Yeah. Sometime we have to do something.
He hasn't told me what he's talking about.
You know exactly what I'm talking about. You're just not willing to admit it to them just yet. And that's fine.
Baguya. Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
Shall we?
Done? Okay. Thank you so much for watching. That's what we understood about the Royal Enfield Himalayan. No.
in my head as a Royal Enfield Hunter 450.
Thank you so much for watching. Don't cut this part out, editor. That mistake was made genuinely, so we should keep it. Thank you so much for watching. That was what we understood about the Royal Enfield Guerrilla 350. What we didn't tell you... 350 bola kya? Damn it. Thank you so much for watching. That's what we understood about the Royal Enfield Guerrilla 450. For your information, we rode it in Maharashtra. We put about 330 kilometers in total on 2 motorcycles. I'm going to say maybe about 20-30% of it was in the dry. The rest of it was all in the wet. The first bike did have some issues, so we had to replace it with the second one. And this is the combined picture of what we've seen together. We've asked you one specific question throughout this recording. Please give us feedback on that. And if there's any questions we haven't answered, please feel free to leave us a comment. We'll try and answer every single comment we get with as much information as we have. So if you're confused about it, please do. And once we get the Guerrilla back for a proper test, at that point, we'll have you and balance stories and all of that kind of thing. That's it.
Gosh.
Thank you so much for watching.